Hi guys, welcome back. This is Steve Woods from Learning Logic. Thanks for tuning in. This is part 2 of creating the to-do list application using .NET 5 Entity Framework, SQL Server and Identity. So where we are at the moment is we've got our application. Obviously it's running obviously different pages. We can register, we can log in, we've got an Entity Framework hooked up to the database, it's all working fine. We've got pages that are secured against unauthorized access, and obviously it's not running at the moment, but if I was to run it, you would see what I mean, because I'm not currently logged in, or am I? If I'm not logged in, it'll show a login page. There we are, login page, because I clicked on about, and that is a page that is only for authorized people, so I have to log in first, and then I can see the about page. If I log off, I no longer can. So we're back to the application. What we're going to do is we're going to basically create the to-do list system in the database and obviously in the application. Now each to-do list item is going to belong to a specific user, so rather than having all users being able to log on and see sort of a master list of to-do lists, they'll each have their own to-do lists, which will correspond to their email address or their account that's currently logged on. So what we need to do is we need to actually create the data structure, the classes for those models, for those to-do list items, and we do that by creating a new class in our models folder, and we'll call this to-do list items. And we simply need to just specify a few properties. I'll do this: public int ID, public string title, that could be the title for the to-do list item. We'll have a boolean value is completed, just to specify whether it's completed or not. Now we need to set up what will be used for our foreign key. Public virtual string application user ID, and now that value will actually that corresponds to the ID field in the application users table, and basically it performs a link between the two tables so that each user has can be sort of referenced to the to-do list items. A user can have many to-do list items basically. We need to tell the application user that that is the case though, so we need to amend the class and add a collection of to-do list items to that class. So public I collection of to-do list items get set. So now each application user class has a collection of to-do list items if it finds them in the database. One more thing that we need to do is we need to adjust the database context so that we can actually query the table in the database directly. So we'll call this a DB set of to-do list items. Can't remember if that has to be public or not. I think it does. Public DB set to-do list items get set. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. I guess we'll find out. So that's basically all it is really. We've created the model, we've created the class of to-do list items. We're going to store an ID, which is the primary key. It's following the naming convention. When it gets added to the database, it's going to be the identity field in the database table, which means it'll get auto incremented every time a new one's created. It's the primary key. It's unique to that record. The application user ID is the foreign key from the application users table and is used to kind of link them together so that users can have multiple to-do list items. Obviously we've got a title for each to-do list item and a flag of whether it's been completed or not. So what we need to do is we need to scaffold that and create the tables in our database. So if we look at our Server Explorer, we can see we've got the Entity Framework database stuff all set up. We've got all those tables. Now we need a table for our to-do list items, and the way we do that is we go back to the command line, we add another migration. So if we go back to Solution Explorer and open up our migrations table, you can see we've got the create identity schema and obviously a snapshot. But that's the actual migration there that gets picked up by the migration tool. We need to create a new one which takes into account our to-do list items. So we need to do dnx ef migrations add, and then we'll just call this add to-do lists. What that's going to do is that's just going to generate another migration script that can be then used by the application to update the database. What it's saying is an operation was scaffolded that may result in the loss of data, and the reason it's saying that is because we're actually updating a foreign key in the table on the ASP.NET users table, so that it now expects a list of the to-do list items. So all we do now is just hit update. You'll see in here it's created that script. It's now running it. It should say done, applying migration add to-do lists, done. And then we go back to the Server Explorer, refresh the table list, ban to-do list items, and we'll see in there it has an ID, it has a title, is completed, which corresponds to our class, and it has the application user ID, which is a string value, and that's going to correspond to this person here, that ID being a string value. So now what we need to do is we need to set up the controllers to display this information. So we're going to leave the database stuff for now. Just going to close it all down, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a new controller. I'm just going to copy and paste. So we're going to, I'm going to call this to-do lists. To-do lists controller even, just to keep everything nice. And obviously I have to rename it in the code as well. To-do lists controller. I'm going to get rid of these methods which are not relevant for this part. So now the only method within this controller I've got is index, which means I need to create a view for it. So I need to create a new folder. Sorry, I'm on a trackpad, it's quite difficult. New folder, to-do lists. Remember that has to match the name of the controller. And I'll just copy one. I'll copy the about page from there into there. Need to rename it index so it matches the method within the controller. We'll open it up and we'll just call this to-do lists. Let's get rid of that for now. So what we should be able to do is, first things first, we'll run the application, and now what we should be able to do is flick to the application, and we should be able to adjust the URL to the to-do lists. And now we see our page, the view that we've just set up. Now the first thing to do really is to make sure that this can only actually be accessed by a user if they're logged in. And the way to do that is to just decorate this method. You can decorate the whole controller so that all methods within that controller require authorization, but I tend to do it just on an individual basis. Just personal preference really, but the way to do it is just to decorate it with an attribute authorize. Simple as that. So now if we run the application and we just refresh the page, it should ask us to log in because we're not actually authorized. So you can see we've made it so that a user has to be authenticated to view their to-do lists. You can see the return URL is /to-do list. So if we log in, it's going to take us to that to-do lists page. So now we need to pass some data, or we need to get some data from our database. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kill the application. In the controller, I am going to probably do this completely wrong, so bear with me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a new application DBContext so that I can query the database directly. So I'm going to DBContext equals new, whoops, this has gone horribly wrong. Yeah, I've done that completely wrong. Sorry, I am tired. Application DB context DB equals new application DB context. We will need to include the models reference. So now that should go a nice green color, and we're ready to go. So I should be able to say Now this is working off the top of my head. We need to get the current user. So we need to know the ID of the current user. So that person is our current user equals user dot identity I think that's correct. Let's just see. Dot identity. And what I need to do is, in fact, I'll do this a different way. I'll try to get the current user from the database directly using the current user session. Here's db.users where the email equals user.identity.name .first or default. So this should get us a user back. We're basically querying the database table for a user with an email address that matches the name, which is also the email address of the currently logged in user. So if that user exists, if current user basically if the current user doesn't exist, then we'll just redirect them back to the home page. But if it does exist, we can attempt to get its list of to-do items. So if current user, in fact let's put it into a variable, var to-do items equals current user.todo list items. If to-do items exist, if they're not null, we add it to the database. Oops, that's wrong. We add it to the view data, which is then passed into the view. So if we remember that, let's just copy and paste to-do items. So it's basically, we get the current user. If the user exists, we check to see if there are any to-do items. If there are, we add it to the view data and pass that into the view. So if we go back to the view, we can then put a thing in here saying, oops, if view data is not null, do this, else will output, sorry, you have no to-do list items. Sorry, I'm just setting this up now. So what this is going to do is, if it's not null, we're going to have to iterate through all of the items in the collection that came back. So the way we do that is just a for each loop. For each to-do list item t in IEnumerable to-do list item. So we've casted that view data to a list, well, an IEnumerable of to-do list items, and now we're basically going to loop through them, and for each one we are going to write out a list item. T.title. So it's pretty straightforward. We're just looping through that collection if it exists and writing out an HTML list with a list of all of the titles. Now this won't work, and I think it's due to a bug in ASP.NET 5. But I'll run it and I'll let you know what I mean. So there we go, it's ready. It's going to bomb out and say something about the database. Right. No database providers are configured. Configure a database provider by overriding onConfiguring in your DBContext class or in the add DBContext method when setting up. So what does that mean? Right. When we first started off, we had this startups.css CS where the DBContext was fed in the options parameter, and it read in that data from the configuration file, which consisted of this connection string. Now what I actually have to do for some bizarre reason, is I have to copy and paste that connection string and manually put it into the data context. And I'm not entirely sure that's by design. And the way to do that is just, it's quite simple really. You just did override void on configuring data DBContext options builder, yeah, options, and then we say options.use SQL Server, oops, and that's all there is to it in there. So if I run this now, probably have to pause it and restart. Excuse me, it's getting late, it's 3 AM, nearly 3 AM. So if I run this now, it should at least work. Say you have no to-do list items. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this is going to work. I may have to create a repository for the data, but just bear with me. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to open up the Server Explorer. I am going to get my current ID, which is that. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to create a to-do list item. I'm going to copy and paste that ID, and I'm going to say to-do list item 1, and it's not completed. So there is actually a record associated with that user ID. Now this may not work. It may not work here. I may have to log in, but even if I log in, it may not work because I haven't actually created a data repository, and for some reason the link between the tables might not be working. So I'm going to refresh that. It says you have no to-do list items, which is just fantastic. So I'll try rerunning it again. I'm not expecting this to work. And it hasn't picked any up. It's basically, if we capture this thing here, let's put some breakpoints in. Come on. Let's refresh the page. It's finding the current user. Current user steve@swoo.co.uk. But that current user does not have any to-do list items. They're null. So for some reason, the list of to-do list items isn't actually being brought back. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to query the database manually, and this is how we do that. We say db.todolistitems.where application user ID equals current user.id, and that may work. I've no idea why that is the case, but there's obviously something that I'm missing. We're linking the tables together. I'm going to have to do a little bit more research. So hopefully that'll display to-do list item 1. So I can go back, I can add more stuff into the database. Let's just copy and paste a few. You get the idea. So now there should be 6 items. If I log in as the other person, hit log in as me, and go to, you can see there are no items. There are no items there for him, for that person. If I log back in as me, oops, you can see I've got my 6 back. So it's actually working for the individual users, and that is how we do that. I'm sorry I haven't managed to successfully link them up. I'll post an update on my blog when I actually figure out what the problem is, but I forget off the top of my head, and it's like approaching 3 AM. But basically, that's how you create subtables and kind of link them together. So you should be good to go. I'll maybe do a part 3 where we do the adding and removing, but just as I'll attempt to do it here. The syntax for adding it basically is if you were to create a new to-do list item, so var item equals new to-do list, we could say item.title equals yabba yabba, item.is completed equals false, item.application user, item.application user ID equals whatever the user ID is, and then we just say db.todolist-items.add item, and then db.save changes. That's basically how you would add an entity to the false. That's how you would add an entity to the database, and we would just do that in a different method on the controller, and we would set up another form based on a view model, like we did on the registration page and the login page. We would just create a new view with a new login with a new view model specifically tailored to what was required for a to-do list item. So you would require a title, and you would require whether it was completed or not, and obviously it would then, when it went through to the back end of the method on the post method, it would automatically detect the user that was logged in. It would update the application user ID property based on that user, and then save it to the database. And Bob's your uncle. That would be the whole top and bottom of it. So I'm just going to get rid of that bit there, because if we have to come back here, I'll be wondering why that is there. But that is it for this part 2 of this tutorial. I hope you're finding this useful. I hope you're seeing some nice things that you can do with Entity Framework, and just basically how quickly you can come up with a nice application using the ASP.NET MVC. I mean, we've got. Let's recap. We've got an application where it's styled pretty much so that you could use it to make something look nice. If you were doing sort of a rapid prototype, it just doesn't just look like bare bones HTML. It's got a nice bootstrap theme against it. We have Entity Framework talking to a database. We've got Identity talking to Entity Framework. So we can actually log on, we can register new users, we can change passwords, we can secure different pages against unauthorized access, we can create new to-do lists, we can list the to-do lists belonging to an individual user. And I mean, the sum total of these tutorials is what, 40 minutes? So it's not bad going, really. I mean, once you get used to it, you can just sort of fly through, and Entity Framework just takes all of the hard work out of keeping your database synchronized, really. I used to use Link to SQL, and it's fantastic, but you have to sort of manually keep the data model updated. So if you were to add a new class property, you have to add that property to the database model, the database diagram, and also you have to update the SQL database manually with the same parameters. And obviously, if you're doing updates throughout the day, that type of thing can mount up in terms of time. Whereas Entity Framework, you just write it in your code, generate a migration script, and update the database, and there you go, you're away, fast as. So I hope you're finding these tutorials useful. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Feel free to share the video with your friends, your family, and whoever else you might think might be interested. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Cheers.